I think we're ready to go, folks. Yeah, we're
Yeah.
there. We're starting. It's 7:07. But the other three are gonna have to come on when they get here, and a couple of bits of news before we even start. Goff.
No, no,
Uh,
no, no archaeological news. No.
well, we will do it, but Goff, look at that.
Wow. I thought you were eating it.
Well, um I've been taking it easy, right? But that is about a third left.
Well done.
So I couldn't get hold of any ice cream. And also, a certain person has had a visit from the police today, and has been basically told that if he turns up on a single walk again, or he sends me a single message, the police are going to escalate this, and
Excellent.
it's likely he'll be arrested.
Very good. Very good. Yeah, that's good.
The problem is that there were too many witnesses.
Yeah.
There were not only to being assaulted, it was the verbal assault, and it was just like too many witnesses. And it was yeah, very interesting. So Richard doesn't know what I'm talking about, but we do start off with a bit of archaeology because I got an image which I'm going to show you. I've got to write up this I got to write up about this artifact, which is found when I went to take the car, right, for an MOT at the old garage in Landau. I went in a field, and there was this weird miniature. It's called a miniature hammer, right, which is probably Neolithic, in the field there. So I'll be writing that up. I was meant to be finishing the report on it today, so I'll finish that later on after this, and I'll show you an image of it as well. So that's that. And what we did last night was we had a big old chunk on vercingetorix, and there was another subject that we did as well. So before we actually do any more, I need to ask you guys what you guys have been up to.
Nothing
Show
from
you
me.
an image of it as well. Go on,
Nothing from me.
Richard.
No, nothing. Nothing.
All right, bit quiet.
This bloke keeps sending me emails and wanting me to write all these things, and
Yeah, you will have another one tonight, Richard. I don't understand why you didn't put it straight into the document, Richard, because that's the point. You sent it separately.
yeah, it was the easiest way to do it.
Well, it's not easy for me because I can't see what's happening. Anyway, thanks for doing that, Richard. Waiting for computer to load software. Oh, that's just basically a lame excuse. It's lame. So I'm just going to alter something on this. We've got a couple of people online as it is now, so I'm going to try and sort this out a minute. Where are we? Live stuff, live. Yeah, there we go. Boomtang Live it is, and we will be starting vercingetorix. Where is it? No, never mind. Okay, there was something in here I want to do. Oh, there we go. Vercingetorix. There we go. I got to do that there. I got to click a link, and we'll be fully into it. There, sorted. And that's that there. I just got to press another button. That's there. And if I type in Iron Age there, and we'll do prehistory there. Good. Richard, what opticians are you with?
Marks and Sparks. Last time I went.
You're Marks and Spencer's opticians?
Yeah.
Hang on a minute. What do you mean Marks and Spencer's?
They got one there.
Are they?
Yeah. Culver House.
It's news to me.
Well,
News to me. Right. Okay. So what I want us to do is I want us to look up. I want us to do vercingetorix, but I went off on another tangent, and it starts off with some images which I'm going to show you. And we're excavating a ditch in West Wales, and I'll click down on Rich. We're excavating a ditch in West Wales, a stone cut ditch. Michelle was standing alongside me 2 days ago, and she said something, and it led to something else. So let's just check onto those images. No, it didn't lead to us rolling about into the field naked. That only happens on a Wednesday. Right. So where are we now? And we've got that there. My God, we're almost on the images straight away. So we've got to do all those. We've got to do all those images there, and we've got these little images at the bottom. But before I do that, that artifact that I just showed you was this one, and this is the one that was found in a field at Landau. I actually, Rich, the honesty thing was, Alan was using the loo at the time, Goff, and I decided to go for a pee in the field. As I'm looking down at the ground, I find this flint. A Neolithic flint is probably a little miniature hammer flint. And that's what I find. And that is going to be placed into the next copy of the newsletter, which I'm sure I will get out to you very, very soon. And what it is, just a little bit of archaeology. You've got a little bit of nap in there, and you've got another bit of nap in there, and you've got more napping. You've got more napping as well. Hang on a minute. You've got lots of napping on this, and it's clearly been worked. So and you can see more detail. So that's what makes it a prehistoric flint. Unfortunately, through it there was a piece of chalk stone which was actually running through the thing, so that I don't think this was ever completed. It wouldn't have been able to do much with it.
Not
So
from around here then.
say that, Anne? No, not from
around here then.
Ooh. It's not from around here then, no. And Anne, whilst you're on the subject, what were you on about this membership thing when you sent me a text? Your memberships are up for renewal, are they?
No,
What were you on about your subscription? What were you on about your
I don't know. You were talking about, it's private. No, it's private.
and whatever, right? I agree with you. Sort it out, right? Let's move on. Yeah. Whatever you said, yeah, that's good. Right. So basically, what it is, is continuing excavating the rock cut ditch, and this is likely to go about 2 meters deeper than we are now, and at approximately 80 centimeters down, where that bag is. Unfortunately, it got muddy overnight and it looks a bit untidy there, but where those 3 red marks are, there's actually charcoal, and it's probably hazelwood in that part of the ditch, so that we'll be continually excavating down. Now I'm not really showing you this for the reason why I want to show you. Obviously, it's nice to show you we're doing a little bit of active archaeology, and we're excavating a rock cut ditch, and that's all nice. But there's another reason. When I was actually showing Michelle, how deep we'd actually got, and we'd got about 1 meter deep now. We're going to be doing more excavation on the weekend. There should be Emma and David here on the weekend helping do some excavation work. I'm not sure when they're coming over, but apparently they're bringing some nice freshly homemade baked cakes and some drinks, so that'll be nice. And Michelle said to me, well, there was a bit of water in this bit of the ditch, and she said, well, is this originally for drainage? And my mind went off on a tangent straight away, and I thought, hang on a minute. One of the things that we didn't examine when we were doing ditches around Iron Age sites. I'm not saying this is Iron Age, by the way. We don't know what date it is.
No.
When we were talking about ditches around Iron Age sites, whether they're hill forts, bank of ditch enclosures, whether they're just normal settlements, whatever they are, right? Nobody even mentioned in any notes, nobody even mentioned in any of the classes that you could actually plant crops in them. And I actually thought this is a bit odd, right? Well, I haven't even thought about this. And I went down on a tangent then. I did a big bit of research, and I actually came across a site in Germany that they've actually found evidence that they were germinating grains in the bottoms of these ditches. And I just thought, if they're doing that, they could easily plant crops in them. Anyway, I went down a tangent, and what I did, I got little sound bites alongside images that I'm going to show you now, right, from different sites. And most of the sound bites disagree with what I'm saying, that they planted crops in them. But that's a good thing, because they don't exactly completely disagree. And then I got one source that basically agrees with what I'm saying, which is great. But it's something that we didn't even think about, right? Something that we didn't even remotely wish to examine. Now, if we think about this site, this is Lodge Hill, which is in Gwent, and you've got this is Oswestry. This is Oswestry Hill Fort. This is apparently the place where Caractacus held out against the Romans, except there's not a single piece of evidence. And then you think of this, right? And it got me thinking. I thought, hang on a minute. I thought, oh my God, am I onto something, that they could have planted crops in these things? And my mind started going into, well, if you planted a crop into the ditch, and then all the sources started to say that there's all this stuff dumped in the bottoms of these ditches. We find all this archaeologically excavated evidence in the bottoms of these ditches. Bits of animal matter, bits of flora, bits of plant matter, decaying vegetables, decaying meat, and all these different things. And I'm starting to think, well, if this is where we're finding all this stuff, we're finding pollen, we're finding burnt grains of wheat and barley, yeah. And I'm just thinking, well, there's so many nutrients in there, right, that you could grow anything, right? And then my mind went off in another tangent. I thought, well, and then this is somebody in Scotland got me going, right, because I did a video. This is nothing to do with these, but I was talking about my Roman sites that I tried to do a video about Roman stone remains in Britain, and somebody said, oh, it's all about the Romans with you, isn't it? And I just said, no, it's not. And I thinking about it. I know, when was the first time we found grape seeds? When was the first time we actually had evidence of viniculture in Britain? It's obviously the Romans, isn't it? And the answer is no, because we actually find that grapes are being grown in Britain well before the Romans. And this is the point. And as you know, folks, on one of these elevations, it would be warm enough to grow grapes at Maiden Castle. This may absolutely sound nuts, but it doesn't, because if we equate to this site, and I think Pat's on with us, I'm not sure if she is, but there's four of you guys there anyway. And the reason why I mentioned Pat is Pat's been to this site with me, Maiden Castle. And not only that this is nutrient rich, I just my mind went off in a complete tangent. I thought, why is there so many banks and ditches if they're not really defensive? And I started to think, this expands the area of agriculture. You know, you could grow all sorts of things up and down these banks, right? And where's the evidence, Carl? And I'm going to talk about that evidence now. And I just thought, I surprised myself, because I just thought, I surprised myself because we didn't even go there. And so this is all important stuff. So what I've done, I've got these little sound bites, yeah. So the first sound bite is there. answering my question and saying that no, they didn't plant crops, but then you read that there's something not quite right with this quote. In the context of Iron Age archaeology, and by the way, before I go any further, this could be any bank and ditch anywhere, right? Bronze Age, Roman period. And one of the things, right, let's go on another tangent. I'm sorry, I'm going off another one. When we think about the Roman site at Vindolanda, right, and we think about the amount of leather shoes that have been found at Vindolanda, I quote 6,000. But and you're thinking all that organic stuff at Vindolanda, right? What's in their ditches, right?
Beans, runner beans.
Anything can. But the point is, you can grow wonders in these ditches, and
Yeah.
then hang on a minute, folks. One thing I didn't do last night, right, was I'm gonna again. This is a lot of tangent stuff tonight, because if we go to type in, right, we're going to go to the medieval period now. I know this sounds all over the place, but the reason why I wanted to give you another perspective, right? Warren Percy, right? Warren Percy. Now this is a famous site known as Warren Percy, right? And that is the earthworks of Warren Percy, right? And what you then have, it's not bringing the image that I want, right? Because the image of Warren Percy is that you've got all the ridge and furrow. So what we type in, we're going to type in medieval, and you'll see the point. What I'm just going to show you now, ridge and furrow in agriculture, right? Now these in the Cotswolds are ridge and furrow. That's it today, and that's it in the medieval period. Do you notice these look like miniature banks and ditches?
Yeah.
And they're used for growing crops, right? So do you see where I'm going with this? At one point, one thing that I said last night was that I'm not lecturing you with a theory. I want you to go away from this today and think, actually, maybe Carl has a point, or maybe he's completely barking. You usually think I completely barking, but you pay me to do this every week. So there you go. In the context of Iron Age archaeology, finding carbonized grain within a ditch often indicates either disposal of crop processing waste or accidental carbonization. It says often indicates. So why are they just chucking their crap in the ditches, right? And the other thing as well is, there's a point to be made here. If the ditches are defensive and you're filling your ditches up, they cease to be defensive. Does that make sense? It does make sense, doesn't it? So, and if you're chucking it in, if you're chucking in these ditches around the outside, and you've got all this moisture, right? You can grow anything in them. So the presence of carbonized grain, particularly in ditch fills, can provide insights into the types of crops grown and processed by Iron Age communities, as well as their subsistence practices. Now, this is Stanwick, right? That's a rock cut ditch at Stanwick, excavated by Sir Morton Wheeler, right? And 1950s. So when Sir Morton Wheeler's excavating at Stanwick, he finds the base of this rock cut ditch, right? And Stanwick is the biggest Iron Age bank and ditched enclosure in Britain, hundreds of acres, right? It's probably a miniature sort of town, or well, not miniature town. It's like a big Caliver or a big Duropolis, and so on and so on. But the one thing about this is that, think about what you could grow in the bottoms of these ditches. Remember, it's filling up with loads of crap, right?
Yeah.
And also,
that's compost, isn't it?
yeah, exactly. That's all this rendered nonsense, right? Which is broken down to grow all sorts of things. Now you're going to grow your beans. You're going to grow your wheat. You're going to grow everything in there, right? And anything that could be used herbally would be grown in these ditches. And also the other thing as well is accessible. And do you know what I saw the other day, right? I saw the other day, I was watching a thing on YouTube, and this is the reverse of what we're talking about. What they in some parts of the world now, to stop wild boar and pigs grazing crops. They build big ditches around the fields. They don't build hedges, right, or big raised dikes, right? They have ditches around them, right? And in those ditches, there's all these pigs running around. And with these pigs running around, you've got all the pig shit, right? And with all the pig shit, you've got all the moisture, and you've got another area to grow things, right? So these are things that we're doing today. And the point is, with all of this, you're starting to see that there's something about these ditches which changes our perspective. If you're, the other thing as well is these are perfect areas for growing things, right? This is still in the idea stage, but some of these notes today are really interesting. The other thing as well is if these bank and ditched enclosures, this is the ditch going around Danebury, right, in Dorset, these big wonderful ditches going around Danebury in Dorset, right? Now you're thinking, all right, what's the thing? I'll answer this question. Don't have to answer it, Anna or anybody. What is it these banks and ditched enclosures are? They could all 5,000 around Britain. They could be anything. But one of the things that I've said when we've excavated these banks and ditched enclosures is that you get all these evidence for post holes. So you've got these four posts in alignment to create a square, right? And these would have had a platform on top and a tiny little building on top of it to keep grain or to keep piglets or to keep chickens, whatever you're going to keep in there, right? And you're thinking, well, hang on a minute, if they're keeping an old grain and so on, and they're protecting what's in these hill forts with a big bank and a palisade around it, but what they doing with the ditches? And you're starting to think, well, this could be a place where they're growing some of their crops. And when you think about this, right, this is something I was going to come on to a few moments ago. You're looking at a section of this ditch, right? So let me just give you something very obvious, right? You've got that, there's the surface horizon, right?
Yeah.
So what you've got, in essence, you've got the ditch here running down, and you've got here, and you basically triple the area. So if you're tripling the area, you can triple the area where you can grow a crop. I know, again, this might sound absolutely crazy, but for me, as a practical person, right, it makes perfect sense. And you're going to get the best moisture at the bottom of this ditch. And also, this is where you're discarding all your waste, right? And again, it's speaking to me, right? It might not be speaking to you, but I'm giving you another alternative to this world. Go on, Anne, quick.
I just feel, that beans and pulses are going to be very important for protein. They can't live on wheat and oats and things. They would be, but they would be growing beans and pulses, which do need ditches.
And also, what comes with having ditches is a variety of mushrooms you can grow.
And mushrooms, right? Yeah.
Exactly, and lots of the things that we're talking about, and I'll tell you the mushroom story in a minute. Lots of the things that we're talking about in archaeology, and is areas where the ground is very disturbed, where wonderful things grow, right? For example, about 2 years ago, Michelle would sit down with a big frying pan, right, here in West Wales, right? She sat down with a big frying pan, right? And she went in the caravan, and she got she had a bowl, and I don't know what she was doing, and then she got a loaf of bread, and she got that ready, and she put this thing in the middle of the bread, and I was eating away at this, and I said, "Oh, this is bloody gorgeous." And she said, "Yeah, that's made with nettles."
Oh.
We were actually eating a nettle burger. We were actually eating a nettle burger, right? So we forget that the majority of the archaeology that we find at these archaeological sites are in the ditches. I've said to Michelle, I can't wait to get to the bottom of this 2 or 3 meter deep ditch, right? Because if we find a single slither of pottery, it'll date the site, right? But it'll only date the site to the time after the ditch was dug, right? Not at the time the ditch was dug, because the artifact in the ditch has come into the ditch after the ditch has been dug, right? But it's still evidence. But what we're going to find down there also, still what I found, is actually some hazel wood. That this is what the charcoal is. I'm pretty convinced it's hazel, because what we've got lots of hazel growing around here, but it looks like it's hazel, right? Anyway, moving on with this, the one that again, I thinking about disturbed and rich soils, right? Disturbed and rich soils. I can remember I used to go to graveyards a lot with my granddad Nobber, right? And I can remember we went to a graveyard in the Vale of Glamorgan outside Dinas Powys, and I remember that the graveyard was full of mushrooms, right? And the best mushrooms were on top of a grave that was almost freshly dug. Obviously somebody had been put there 6 months earlier, right? And my granddad said we collected a load of mushrooms off the top of this grave, right? And we're eating away at these mushrooms, and they're absolutely gorgeous, right? So we take them home, and obviously these mushrooms are going to, due to the disturbed soil, not the body, which is 6 foot under, because the body is still in a coffin. It's not even really decayed yet. So, but anyway, the point is, we've got these mushrooms in disturbed soil, right? That's the point. It's disturbed soil. So I take them back and I give them to my mum, and my mum cuts them up and gives them to the guests in the morning in sandwiches and all the rest of it. And for dinner time, my mum's eating away at one of these mushroom sandwiches, what's left of the mushrooms. And I say to my mum, that's come from freshly off somebody's grave. My mum goes, "Oh my God, no, it's not. No, it's not. It's definitely not. You're lying," she's saying, right? But the point is, it's all about disturbed ground, right? Back to this whole point. If you're putting all this material in a ditch, right? And by the way, everybody on YouTube, thanks for joining us. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and you can put comments in the box there. Join Emma and whoever else is there. Again, this title on your ditch as a refuge deposit. So Iron Age ditches, while sometimes serving as defensive features, sometimes serving, whoever's writing this is not convinced themselves, also frequently acted as dumping grounds for various materials, including household waste and discarded food remains. Carbonized grain found in the ditch fills can be interpreted as evidence of this practice, indicating that the ditch was used for the disposal of crop processing refuge such as husks, chaff, and weed seeds. Now, there's a reverse on this, right? There's a reverse on this. So we're excavating some ditches and we're finding all this evidence. So why are they not utilizing this really, really firm, rich soil? So we go off onto another tangent. We go into ditches that we don't find anything in them. The amount of times I've seen Time Team when they've got really excited and they're digging away with the digger and there's nothing in the ditches at all, right? And you're thinking, well, why is there nothing in the ditches? And the archaeologist nicely stand there and says, the reason why there's nothing in the ditches is in the past, they used to come along and they used to clean out the ditches on a regular basis. Why did they clean out the ditches on a regular basis? Oh, they cleaned them out on a regular basis because they needed them for defense. But then again, let's look at something else, right? I remember saying to I've got a counsellor I speak to every week to do with my acting, right? And I said to him, one of the fondest memories I've got when I was a child was working at the likes of Cosmeston Medieval Village. It was an absolutely brilliant time. I learned so much about archaeology at Cosmeston Medieval Village, right? And one of the things that I was learning was the things that you'd find in ditches, right? And what things in ditches could tell you about the medieval archaeology. But there would be another thing. I don't know why. And I'm going to say it. The council have decided to use Cosmeston Lakes as this for a new sort of water park, which I think is an absolutely brilliant idea. So because more people will be visiting Cosmeston Medieval Village, and it'll get more use now, right? But having more people visiting Cosmeston Medieval Village, they'll be visiting the Byre, right? Which is basically a house with a barn and more accommodation in the shape of a U, right? In the yard of this reconstructed Byre at Cosmeston Medieval Village, which was the first building excavated and reconstructed in 1984, right? The story that we used to, the evidence that you used to find in this sort of courtyard of the byre, right, was actually evidence that this was the place that people used to take their human waste, their animal waste, the broken up materials, all this stuff on this list in front of us on this little chart, right? And they used to and basically it used to compost down, right? It was their compost area in the yard, right? And then what you would do when springtime comes, you would go to the reeve who looked after this building, right? The reeve was like the steward of the village when the lord of the manor was on there, which was most of the time, right? And you would go to the reeve and you'd basically say, hey, look, reevey babes, you know, I need some I need some manure. I need some compost, whatever you want to call it. I need some material to place onto the fields to for the growing of crops for the following season. And you'd have to pay, mind my French, for your own shit that had composted down within the reeve's yard, right? That's in the medieval period, right? So hang on a minute, right? If it's so valuable in the medieval period, why is it not as valuable in the Iron Age? And it would have been as valuable in the Iron Age. It would have been so valuable in the Iron Age that it would have been so. Hence, when you've got people on time teams saying, oh, you know, these ditches are cleaned out on a regular basis for defensive reasons, they're cleaned out on a regular basis because that material's used and placed on fields. It's a fact, right? It's a fact. Well, there's another story that I never talk about because I used to, back in about 1990 something or other, 1996 or something like that, we used to have archaeological field walking near St. Bride's, right? And there was a site near St. Bride's called Norton Hall Farm, and we were looking around the field. We'd find bits of broken flint and bits of medieval pottery and all these different things spread in the field, right? And I'd be thinking, wow, this is brilliant, why is it here? And there'd be these bits of flint in the field, right? And that's lots of this stuff from the medieval, from the likes of the Neolithic period, might have been spread in the field from ditches, right? It makes perfect sense. Muck spreading. What I'm embarrassed about is that if I'd have reported the finds there and then, I would have been responsible for finding the first Neolithic causeway site anywhere in Wales, but I was beaten to it by the museum, who went out with geophys and LiDAR. So there's my little bit of a weird story. But anyway, back to this site, and we're thinking, right, okay, we're thinking Lodge Hill, which is in Gwent, and you've got Llanmelin as well, which is very similar. You've got Lodge Hill, which is above Caerleon, right? And you've also got Llanmelin, which is, you know, these are really similar sites.
Yeah.
And this one here is Oswestry. And you look at Oswestry and there's something about a point, right? And I don't know why somebody's mentioned that they saw REM and the Cranberries in 1996, but let's move on. But anyway, the point is, isn't this look really weird in Oswestry, right? It's a very weird site, right? And if you take a piece of this, right, and you think, right, okay, let's just think of this as a defensive site. Okay, let's attack it. Right, okay, where are we going to attack it from? Right. All right. So the one place we're not going to attack it from is hang on a minute. There we go. It's here. Because there's all these weird things there, right? Probably best not to attack it here either. But probably the best place to do is to overcome these sets of defenses, to use this as shelter, right? And you've got this open area here, right? And then you can attack it from here. Okay, we talked about a defensive thing then, but when you think more practically about a site like this, we're thinking, well, what is this area here? When archaeologists see things like this, they say it's an annex, right? It's an annex. And when you go to like Dunraven Castle, and you've got the Iron Age site alongside Dunraven Castle, right? And hopefully you're there, Pat, aren't you? Yes, good. I'm being told by somebody online you're in the waiting room, and I don't know how they know that, but that's life. But the one thing about Dunraven Castle, there's an annex, right? And the point is that they always say, oh, they built an annex at Dunraven Castle, the hill fort there, right, in the Iron Age, because they needed as an animal enclosure, or they needed more people were there, and all these different things. And you're just thinking, well, these places are just not practical, right? They're really not practical for defense. And what I was saying earlier on, Pat, do you know what we're going to do, right? Pat, because you've joined us a little bit later, right? Pat, you remember that, don't you? Maiden Castle. Nobody tell her, guys. And don't interrupt. Nobody tell her, right? Can you remember that, Pat? Right?
Yes.
Yeah. Can you remember wandering around the top of this and finding out that certain sides of it were warmer than others? You'd be blown to death on one side, and the other side it was warm. Can you remember that?
No. Sorry.
Well, I can. Right.
Good. Okay.
And basically, basically, you can see this from the image, right? That it's because of the light, it's darker on this side
Yeah.
than it is on that side. Yeah, got it? Right. So, these ditches and banks were very high, weren't they? They were very steep. Yeah. Remember that?
I remember that. Yeah.
Yes. Now, just think about it. What if you started planting crops in these on these banks of the ditches? They would be exposed to different levels of sunlight and moisture and rain, right? This is what we're actually talking about today. So anyway, back to where we were. We're looking at this site at Oswald Street, and we're thinking, well, there's something else going on here. And again, we're told in common folklore that the Romans fought Caractacus here, but there's no evidence of any siege. So I know we've mentioned a little bit about this, and this is the thing as well. It keeps coming up. Accidental carbonization. In some cases, the presence of carbonized grain in ditches may not be solely attributed to disposal. What does that mean? Accidental fires, perhaps from cooking or heating, could have caused carbonization of grain stored or processed in the vicinity of the ditch. So they accidentally ended up in the ditch. Yeah, fair enough. Oh, they accidentally ended up in the ditch. And there's a wooden palisade there. You know, what's all that about? Fire? I don't know. So the resulting carbonized remains could then be carried into the ditch by runoff or other natural processes. Right, and you stand to think, well, there's a hell of a lot of material in these ditches. So when we're excavating generally these sites, right, you're not finding them in the surface levels, right, where people are living. You usually find them in depressions or holes in the ground, you know, grain silos or post holes or pits for anything, right? But you find a lot of this material in these ditches. And, you know, this is the thing. Archaeologists get very excited about ditches. I get very excited about a ditch because I'm excavating a ditch at this minute, and I'm thinking, I'm really looking forward to what's in these ditches, because I know I'm not going to find anything anywhere else. And again, it's that very thing that we're missing. There's something there's obviously another reason why this material's in these ditches. And also the other obvious thing as well, right? The other obvious thing, right? And it says it in one of these little cards before we get to vercingetorix, right? It basically says, well, flax. Flax could have been grown in the moisture of these ditches. Flax then being used for material, for clothing. And you're thinking, well, hang on a minute, if they're growing flax, why aren't they growing barley and wheat in these ditches, right? So it's just an obvious progression. And also the other thing as well is, right, this is quite simple. This doesn't need an expert to work this out. If you've got carbonized grain in a ditch, right, not all that grain is going to be carbonized. Some of it will be just normal grain. And what happens with normal grain when it's in a deep ditch with a lot of moisture? It grows to fruition, and you get wheat, barley, and other cereals. And you remember the parable of the good sower? The parable of the good sower, he spreads his seed, and some of it lands in the open field, some of it lands on the bank, and some of it lands in the ditch. And the stuff in the ditch grows the greatest. So again, this is not me saying this is what's going on, but then again, don't archaeologists turn around to say this is for defense? That's all there is for defense. It's to defend. And I'm thinking, hang on a minute, right? We're now not thinking like that. I'm trying to get your minds thinking again. So Iron Age farmers cultivated various types of wheat and barley within their fields, and some of this would accidentally end up in the ditches. And also, you know, the analogy, you know, it's quite simple, right? Let's be a little bit sort of back to basics, right? The reason why pigs root around in human waste is because there's lots of material in the human body that doesn't break down, such as grains. And those grains, when they come out the other end, are in the muck in the ditch. And what's going to happen with those grains? They're going to germinate. They're going to turn into wheat, barley, other cereals, and so on. So wheat, emmer, and spelt wheats, okay, they're very sort of hardy. They can grow on the banks, right? They can grow anywhere really, right? Barley needs a nice amount of moisture, regular moisture. Whole barley was a main staple, sometimes accompanied by naked 2-row barley. Other cereals, oats, and sometimes rye were also present, though often in small quantities and potentially as weeds. Now, one of the things that we used to look at Cosmeston Medieval Village, and it was the medieval site, but then again, do you know Cosmeston Medieval Village is actually made on an Iron Age site? There was an Iron Age site there before. The Roman site was at Cosmeston, and then after the Roman site, there's a medieval site. And what did we find when we excavated in Cosmeston Medieval Village? Iron Age ditches, right? And you're starting to think, hang on a minute, right? Okay, let's just think about the medieval period. We're thinking, right? I always paint this thing in the medieval period. That, you know, if their oats and their rye crops failed, for example, they're going to die. But if you've got ditches and you've got beans growing, all you need is a couple of beans that have just dropped into the ditch, right, and are in the muds, and the ditches slowly dry out in the springtime, summertime, and they start to grow. There you go. You got your pulses growing. So this is another nice little site. This is Segsbury. And again, there's no order, there's no sense to, there's obviously a road going through it. There we go. But this is Segsbury, and you can get an idea of scale. Single ditch, single bank, right? What's going on here? Would you be able to defend a site like this? No, you wouldn't, right? It's just, you know, it's fairly flat. You know, what's that ditch for? And time again, drainage comes up. And if you've got drainage, moisture, that's your ability to do something with it. And when we think about all these sort of all the medicinal plants, right, come from boggy, marshy areas, and obviously you've got your cresses as well. On your banks, you might have your mints, for example. You're going to have all sorts of different things growing in these ditches, right? And obviously crops, again, things that you can use. So again, Segsbury that we just looked at, look at Catcoat and Cleveland, these are actually in Oxfordshire, have yielded carbonised plant remains, including wheat, barley, providing evidence for the cultivation of these crops during the Iron Age. So let's just look at that statement. So we've got to rely upon evidence in ditches to tell us that they were planting crops in fields. You just heard what I've just said. We'll just leave that there. You're understanding where I'm going with this. So Honington Camp, this is again in Lincolnshire. Again, this is a fairly flat landscape. And then within the rest of the landscape, you've got your farmsteads, you got your banks and ditches. And one thing inevitably that we saw with lots of these sites, and I'm going to come up with something else now, which is going to be very, very interesting for all of us. When you think about all of these sites, you've got to think about these people not wasting their landscape, right? And then we go to Scotland, and we're starting to show you evidence in the Iron Age that lots of people were, for example, they were farming the landscape. There's lots of stony banks. There's lots of stone cut ditches. They're going through all these efforts, right? And there's also something else about these banks and ditches. They're good shelterage for animals, right? This is one thing that people miss. And this is something I've learned. We started digging a hole here for another underground greenhouse, and the stone, it got so difficult to dig that we just basically stopped. And then my cheeky sheep. I don't know if there's any in there now, right? Our cheeky sheep just jumped into the ditch, and they go in there for shelter from the wind. And that reminds me of something. Anne was there; she was in the room, and there was Norman Jenkins, Storm and Norman, of Taliban Farm in Vale Morgan, right? And Storm and Norman gave a talk for us, and he was basically saying that he went to West Wales, right, and he visited a local farmer friend, and his local farmer friend, he said, oh, hey Norman, come over here, have a look at this, right? And it was the archaeologist excavating alongside a bank in the middle of a field, and he's saying to Norman, he's saying, my dad built that bank there, and they think it's an Iron Age earthworks, right? And Norman said, you're being really cruel. He said, oh, they're digging it up, and it's giving them something to do. And Norman saying, you're being really cruel, right? Why don't you tell the archaeologists that your dad dug that bank? And because he said the archaeologists are convinced that it's a Neolithic earthwork, right? But the dad built the bank and the ditch to shelter the animals, right? And this is in West Wales only a few decades back, right? Anyway, Norman said, oh, look, you're being really cruel. So he went over to the archaeologists, and he said to the archaeologist, this one here, look at the one over there. It's in the shape of a cross, right? And the archaeologist said, oh my God. So they went over there and started excavating the one in the shape of a cross. And then he said, no, don't dig there. And they said, oh yeah, we've got to dig over there. We've got permission to dig all over the place, right? Anyway, they dug all around this whole thing, and they dug through the thing, and they couldn't find any evidence. And Norman and his farmer friend said, look, we've got a photograph of his dad building this, right? And the reason why the bank is shaped in a cross and there's ditches all the way around it is for the only reason of sheltering the sheep. And you can start to think that maybe our ancestors were a lot more savvy and practical than meets the eye. They didn't just build these things for whatever reasons you think. They built them for other purposes. Yeah, so again, just reiterating this, and then we'll go on to this in Germany. This is the end bit of this little session, right? And then we'll go on to vercingetorix. So additional evidence besides grains, archaeologists often find weed, seeds, chaff. We've mentioned that within the ditch fills. These can help to understand the agricultural landscape, the types of processing that took place, and the overall subsistence strategies for the Iron Age. So obviously they're grinding grain and all the rest of it. But why are we using secondary locations to understand what they're planting in the fields, right? Again, that question, you don't need to answer it. So while Iron Age ditch, there we go. It says there, yeah, we're being unbiased here. We're just putting what somebody else has got here. While Iron Age ditches were not directly used to grow crops. How do they know that? How do they know that? They were a significant part of Iron Age agricultural practice. So I can go the other side, right? I can go the other side, right? Okay, you're finding grains and you're finding all this stuff done in the ditches. You're not doing anything with it. But then you're using that to prove that they planted crops in the field, when you haven't got evidence of them planting crops in the field, because all the ridge and furrow from the Iron Age has been wiped out, right? So you're presuming. So that's as bad as saying that they didn't plant crops. So they were used to define fields, create enclosures for livestock, and could also have been used for activities. But there at the bottom, it clearly says that flax is growing in these ditches, in waterlogged ditches, which is a crop, right? There you go. It says they're not directly growing crops, and the next minute growing flax. See, I get very frustrated with this. It's like 1 minute no, and the next minute yes, and the next minute you're completely wrong, and there we go. Right, there we go. Right. So they've gone a bit quiet on YouTube. Nobody's saying anything. I think you upset the man.
Yeah, the ditches. I know I did a painting.
Go on, Anne, give us it. Go on.
I did a painting once of a girl climbing a stile over a ditch, because all these ditches, well, it was in like the lighthouse, down towards the lighthouse in Newport, so it sort of like went Luke,
Yeah.
And
the dikes.
Yeah, they had these ditches, and
yes.
Well, there's a dike on the end, but there's a part of it that is, well, earlier. I mean, this is when in my childhood there wasn't a dike. And there was parts of it where there wasn't a dike, but they had all these ditches, but they had sheep, loads of sheep there. So
And obviously, this is all part of that landscape. Exactly. You're not
yeah,
just.
I didn't know what
Yes.
they were for, and
Yeah, exactly. But maybe we've just answered it. Maybe we've just
Yeah.
answered it. Now,
Yeah,
this
like
next
if it
thing,
was right on the rivers, the wind would have been pretty bad,
and
right
it
on
would have protected your sheep would have been protected. This is the whole point. It's not just.
the,
It's a lot more than meets the eye. So we're
yeah.
going to a site in Germany. Um, called I can't Eberdingen Hochdoft, which is completely wrong. Goff can correct me there. But what they've got is this site in Germany. I was looking at this thing. I was trying to find evidence of what they could have been doing in ditches in other contexts, and I found it. It was great. So basically, what we've got the excavated ditch with barley malt on the bottom of the Ochdorf site in the Iron Age. So there we go. We got the evidence, and in amongst all that, you got grains, right? Which are these grains, loads of them, right? So what I've done is done a little story. What is barley malt? And I answer that. I got some little slides there. So they're excavating this site, and the wonderful thing about this site, it basically says that they're doing more about the ditches than meets the eye. Now, David Jones has come on. He said I'd always considered the ditches were to lower the water table in the enclosure and firm up the ground. Growing crops and getting fertilizer from ditches makes sense. And again, that's a really good really good sort of benchmark there, because the site above the ditch is going to be drier, right? But then you're wasting this moisture if you're not doing anything with it. And again, it makes perfect sense. It really, really does. So, but what else could you be doing with these ditches? Is the point? What are they? Is there more evidence for doing more with these ditches? So, at the bottom of these ditches, in that big, thick black layer, right? They're doing something, right, which is emblematic of the evidence that they found. And the point is, usually this type of evidence isn't going to survive because it's organic. And that is the point. The point is you find carbonized grains in the bottom of a ditch because they've been carbonized. Anything that hasn't been carbonized is just going to decay, and you're going to leave no evidence. So in absence of evidence, you might be able to infer that they were doing more with them in this example in Germany. So Hans-Peter Stieker, he basically said that we've specialized, they found a ditch structure in the Iron Age settlement at Eberdingen at Hofdoft that contained large numbers of evenly germinated hulled barley grains. So in the ditch, right, they're actually they're germinating barley grains in the ditch. This malt appears to be the result of deliberate germination, given the purity of the find. So in other words, what they're getting is not bits of pottery, it's just these grains, right? And let's discuss what these grains mean. You can see there, they're really good structure. They're not all being completely carbonized. And there it is. Barley malt is barley grain, which is these grains, that has been deliberately sprouted, germinated, and then dried, a process known as malting. So run that past you again. So you've got the barley grain that's deliberately sprouted, allowed to sprout, allowed to germinate with moisture, then dried. This process develops enzymes within the grain that breaks down the starch. So as they're germinating, right, that germination is turning the starch into sugars. So that means that the sugars can develop in the grain to create the growth, but that is terminated, right? That is terminated for malting, making the barley suitable for brewing. So there it is. This is quite really self-explanatory tonight, to be honest with you. You don't have to think, right? So here's a more detailed explanation. So the malting process. Malting begins with soaking barley in water for several days, encouraging it to sprout. Germination. During this period, the barley's enzymes begin to break down its starches into sugars. Again, made it so simplistic tonight. However, this makes the archaeology understandable. Then you can read the archaeology so easily if you make it so simple. And then you dry it out. Once the germination reaches the desired stage, so obviously the sprouting there it is. You dry it, and you dry the barley grains out. Typically in a kiln, obviously a corn dryer or something like that, but something that's not going to roast them, not something that's not going to carbonize them, to halt the process and prevent further sprouting. So in other words, you've got the sugar levels you need, and therefore that's going to be emblematic and suitable, the barley suitable for brewing, right? So enzymatic activity. This dried malted barley contains a high concentration of enzymes that are crucial for converting the starches in the grain into fermentable sugars. So sugars fermentable during the brewing process. This is the last stage, really. And it's malted barley. Can you remember that smell that you used to get in Cardiff? You don't get it anymore.
I was just thinking of that.
Oh, yeah. Anne, it used to come off the train at Cardiff Central, and there used to be this really weird smell, and you knew you were in Cardiff.
Yeah.
Obviously, I was so pleased to be in Cardiff and not Paul Talbot, which absolutely stank of rotten eggs. But Cardiff used to get this really and you knew you were in Cardiff with Brains beer. So the malted barley is the primary grain used in beer brewing, providing the sugars that yeast ferment to produce alcohol. It is also used in baking as a sweetener and as a food ingredient. So in other words, the ditches are all part of this process. And I thought, do you know what? For going off on this little thing, it was just Michelle stood on the side of the ditch. I think there's water there, and this is for drainage and their storage. She said these ditches are for storing water, and I just thought, hang on a minute, I'm going to go off on another tangent there, and this is what I come up with. I was so pleased with that. Oh my God! So what we're going to do, we're going to start off with a little bit of vercingetorix, and then what we're going to do is we're going to take a break. Right, so I put a lot. We put a lot of energy into this as we have already tonight. But we're thinking we're going over to the continent. And one thing that was asked by David from Cumbria last night, he basically said, "Look, Carl, I had no idea that the Britons were going over to help Vercingetorix in 52 BC." In their fight against Rome, right? And basically, I turned around and said to David, David, we mentioned a little bit about Julius Caesar the other week, which we've got to do in great detail. And by the way, guess what we're doing next week? Spartacus. If we're going to really start to look at the Romans, we're doing Spartacus next week. I'm Spartacus, and so's my wife.
He was on the telly the other night.
Oh my God, you watched it as well. There were several people who watched Spartacus last night. With good old Kirk Douglas.
I'm not Spartacus, though.
I'm Spartacus. And the reason, again, we mentioned the Spartacus, Vercingetorix, Caratacus. The reason why the Romans wanted to get the figurehead, right? And they wanted to get hold of Vercingetorix. This is all down to the Spartacan rebellion only 2 decades earlier or more. But anyway, point is that all of this stuff about Vercingetorix and 52 BC, and then when we look at Julius Caesar 56 BC, when his first failed attempt of Britain takes place, he's coming over to Britain because those Britons are a pain in the bloody backside, right? Because they're going over to France. They're helping the Gauls resist the Romans, and this is basically what's going on. By the way, we've got Spartacus homework for next week, I'm reminded. And so what we've got here is the Asterix and the Gauls. And somebody's put something really sensible on here as well. David has kindly said, I have been following you for a few years, but for some reason I haven't been getting notifications till today. I'll make a point of checking your feed more often. I enjoy your delivery style. David, you've got to press the bell. When you're a subscriber, you've also got to press the bell, and that's how you get notifications of my videos on what's going on. But and as somebody said online that I'm brilliant. So there we go. Oh, you guys think I'm brilliant as well. The reason why we mention Asterix and the ghouls, that's what my basically when I was in school, right, my English teacher was very racist, and one day he asked us what we used to like reading, and Tommy, the Chinese boy, he come in and he said, the English teacher said, well, what do you like watching? And he said Asterix and the ghouls. And he took the mickey out of Tommy for not being able to pronounce Asterix and the Gauls, right?
Wow.
And the reason why I mentioned Asterix and the Gauls is that what you've got is there's figures that crop up in Asterix a lot, and they're British. It's the Britons who have come over to help Asterix, right? And that's the point. This is why we mention Asterix. And we're thinking, oh, come on, Carl, Asterix is a complete cartoon thing. But Julius Caesar's mentioned in it, right? The Roman legionaries are mentioned in it, right? The fight of the Gauls against the Romans, that's mentioned in it. So we start to look at Asterix and you start to think, actually, there's a few facts in this, right? And you start to think, well, hang on a minute. The person who's writing Asterix, where did he get the idea that the Britons were coming over to help Asterix, right? And the point is, when you think about Asterix is probably inspired by the stories of Vercingetorix, right? And Vercingetorix has got a dad called Celticus, and the one point about all of this is that where there's these stories, there's something helping us understand history. So in other words, Asterix was a good history story for children, and this is where we're at now, looking at Vercingetorix, Asterix, and there we go. We got a coin of Vercingetorix. The problem is with coins of Vercingetorix, there's lots of forgeries. The Romans made coins celebrating Vercingetorix. What did you just say, Carl? Hang on. The Romans made coins celebrating Vercingetorix. Yes, they did. The reason why we got an idea what Vercingetorix looked like is because of coins that were produced by the Romans. But this is a coin produced by Vercingetorix's tribe itself. But this might be a stereotypical head, which shows Vercingetorix as a god. But then again, that's not too far away from the truth. And these are the coins. Now, the reason why I'm saying that's not too far away from the truth is, what does Vercingetorix mean? We've done a lot of this, haven't we? We've even mentioned King Arthur when we shouldn't have. King Arthur's not going to occur for another 500-600 years. But when we were talking about this, I remember saying that Arthur might be a title bear head used by a number of leaders in post-Roman Britain from the late 400s, 500s. We mentioned Caractacus might actually be a title rather than an actual name of an individual, right? And we still got to look at Boadicea, who's going to come up sooner or later, right? And Vercingetorix. What does Vercingetorix mean? There we go. So the Gaulish name Vercingetorix can be literally translated as great king. Hang on a minute. Hang on a minute. Hang on. It means a great king? Surely it's a name of somebody. I am Vercingetorix and so is my wife. So Vercingetorix, great leader or leader of warriors. Ver means over, superior, means somebody great, right? And Kingeto means warrior. So Vercingetorix, without the rex on the end, means great hero or great warrior. So in other words, suddenly this person is a guy, a teenager, turns into a man, his dad dies, And then suddenly they give him this title, vercingetorix. What does Rix mean? Move the I and replace it with an E, and it means yeah. There you go. This great, this huge figure, this great king, this superior king, the greatest of kings, the king of kings, in Ozymandias. May I weep in despair. So basically, Irish scholars have proposed that there's a form of vercingetorix Anri, which it could mean this person is endowed to inspire terror in the enemies. That's basically from the Irish. So this is one of the things that all of this is to give credence and ownership of a name, and vercingetorix is part of that tradition. So when even when you look at Roman emperors, right? Roman emperors, Roman emperors, when they become emperors, in their name they've got Augustus, they've got Caesar in their name. Some of them have got Tiberius, and somewhere along the line you get the name of the actual Roman emperor, right? Most of the time, not even their birth name. And so this is what we're talking about with these titles. So he was a Gallic king, Gallic leader, who eventually become leader of the Gallic tribes, later part of 52 BC. And he started off as the great leader of the Arverni tribe, and then eventually united the Gauls in initially a successful revolt against the Romans, right? And it all comes down to might. Vercingetorix could be compared to Quetzalcoatl, right? And Quetzalcoatl, when we think about the likes of the Zulu, in late 1878, coming into 1879 in Zululand, and then basically what you've got Quetzalcoatl basically saying, look, you know, I'm this great leader, and the British feel threatened by Quetzalcoatl and Lord Chelmsford, and Chelmsford invades Zululand before Queen Victoria can stop him against Queen Victoria's orders. And what happened is the Battle of Isandlwana. The British Army is categorically, completely, not only wiped out, is one of the biggest crushing blows that a Western army has ever had against a native contingent anywhere on the planet, right? And the reason why I'm mentioning Isandlwana is that this was the start of a very successful campaign of Quetzalcoatl against the British. It ended with the Lundy, where the British turned up with Gatling guns, and history changed. Also, when you think about that campaign, there were many more victories. If you look this up, there were many more victories that the Zulus had over the British that we're not told about in the history. You can dig into it, you can find it. The Rorke's Drift, I believe, was a draw. It was not a victory for the British at all. It was the Zulus basically saying, "You've been very brave. We'll let you off." But the point is, the reason why I'm using that is it's a parallel to what was happening with many hundreds of years earlier, 1,900 odd years earlier, when we look at this campaign of Vercingetorix and the Gauls against the Romans. There are victories, and then suddenly the upper hand of the mighty empire gets its own, and it's the same. It's the same as what happened with at the Battle of Little Bighorn. It's one of my favorite battles where the Native Americans completely wipe out to a man every single American soldier at the Battle of Little Bighorn. I love seeing it. I love stories about it. But then eventually, the Native Americans, like the native Gauls, like the native Zulus, are eventually defeated by the behemoth of the state in the case of the Americans, the United States Army, the United States Cavalry. So all of this is very much linked with Julius Caesar. This is all very much linked to Britain and the British. And this man probably was born in 80 years BC, a few years before the revolt of Spartacus, and basically within. So he's born in 80 BC, so 70, 60. He was 28 when he became leader of his father's tribe. In fact, the people turned against Celticus, who had been the father, who had been the leader of the Averni tribe. They thought they'd kick Celticus out. And Vercingetorix come in and said, right, I'm the big man. You know, I'm going to be big leader of the Averni tribe. I'm going to try and unite the Gallic tribes. And that's exactly what he did. But his father didn't manage to do it. So to give you a little bit of an idea, and if I could do this in a little bit more order than I did last night, I ran too far ahead myself last night. So if we look at that chart, we can see in the middle of the screen underneath Celtica, which is named after Vercingetorix's dad, not the Celts, or maybe I'm wrong or right, we're not really sure at all, but Celticus is the name of Vercingetorix's dad, so it makes sense that this was called Celtica. Is this named after the Celts or the name of Celticus, Vercingetorix's dad? So what we're talking about is there's some really key battles here. Everyone loves a battle. Gergovia was this massive victory. In fact, Vercingetorix completely spanked Julius Caesar's backside, right? Like Cetsueo spanked the backside of Chelmsford at Islanduana, that both of them had to come back and wipe out the native contingent. Right, hour of revenge. Right, you've poked a big beast in Julius Caesar. Julius Caesar is not going to let this go. So, and there is one of the campaigns. This is, and then you've got Avaricum. That is very key to this. And then you've got along the line of Elise, and you've got all of the little battles along the way. But so what's exactly happening here? Elysia is the place where eventually Julius Caesar has the upper hand and defeats the likes of Vercingetorix. But you can imagine that this is way down in the middle of France, right? And you can imagine the British coast, and it is quite amazing that the likes of Commius, this leader that had sort of probably met Julius Caesar, the Commius in 52 BC had taken an army of Britons over to help Vercingetorix. But there's something weird about this whole story, right? And I didn't really explore this very much last night. And as you can see, I'm in full flow, so I've got to take a break in a minute. And I've got to feed the sheep and the chickens, so I do that soon. But one of the things is that one of the key reasons why Julius Caesar is coming over to Britain in 56 BC, then eventually to succeed is 55 BC, was to stop the Britons from providing aid to the Gauls, right? And he got an agreement to stop this, right? Only for a couple of years, right? And then the Vercingetorix, he's wandering about and doing terrible things to the Romans, burning their cities, towns. Villas, all the rest of it, exactly what the Romans did to them, he's doing to the Romans. And then what's happening is that after Vercingetorix is defeated, Britain's left alone, which is quite strange. You would think that Julius Caesar would go back and go over to Britain and give him another pasting. He didn't, which is very, very strange. So the Battle of Elysee is a really, really strange thing indeed. And because it could have been a great victory. It was close on being a great victory for Vercingetorix. But when you think about, this might be an exaggeration on Julius Caesar's side, but it's said that up to 11 Roman legions were used in tackling Vercingetorix at Elysee. If that's the case, that represents over half the Roman military strength across their fledgling empire at one spot at any one time. Vercingetorix would eventually be executed by a Roman state that would revere him. So he'd be captured in 52 BC, but would then be a prisoner and wandering around the streets of Rome until about 46 BC, where he would be garroted in a public ceremony, apparently, and that would end his life. So what we've got to do is, again, just think, that's Vercingetorix, Asterix. And when you think about the name Asterix, right, Rix at the end, king, there you go. There's a little bit of a history lesson there. And there it is. These are coins produced, and maybe the one at the bottom is a modern reproduction. That's what it looks like to me. But the one at the top there, that's a silver denarii. Half a denarii for my life story. That's what Jesus said. But anyway, the point is there. What you've got is the wavy hair of Vercingetorix. It's almost as if it's a coin design that Anne's husband would have done for the Royal Mint. I'm sure Anne would agree. Look at the absolute detail on that. You know, absolutely amazing, right? And this is a design of a coin that was made in 58 BC, 4 years after Vercingetorix had been defeated by the Romans, and he's revered on a coin. Can you add that? He's just thinking, well, and also this is one of the things that I may never mention again, but I'll mention it now. The Romans always feared having people that were too stronger than them. The Romans always feared being defeated, right? They had it with Hannibal and the Carthage. And the Romans had it 200 odd years later with likes of Vercingetorix. I forgot my dates there, at least 100 years later. That'll be another campaign we'll have to look at. And the Romans would always fear people within rebelling, really, and destroying their world. And Vercingetorix is celebrated there. And there's a chariot, a war chariot.
Yeah.
So in other words, what you've got Vercingetorix there on the left, and one of Vercingetorix's war chariots on the right. You can't make this up. It's like, hang on a minute. And then on the other coin there, which is this coin, or it might be the light this is reproduced. It is obviously, this might be genuine, but or whatever. It probably likely to be genuine. But if it's a copy, it's a copy of a genuine coin. Sorry, I got myself tongue-tied there. But anyway, the point is, that's Vercingetorix. You know that's Vercingetorix there on the right, because there's Vercingetorix there. So his long flowy hair, there's Vercingetorix with his little beard. And look at those big chunky muscles there. A woman's dream, right? And there above is Julius Caesar. Basically, I have conquered Vercingetorix. So this is on another coin. And that might represent a Roman goddess on the left there, on a coin. And what we're going to do, don't forget, you know, when we do coins, we've got to look at coins associated with Britannia. So that's one thing that we'll have to do. So I think what we're going to do now, we're going to take a break.
Yeah.
And it's going to be a 15-minute break. And those online can discuss how wonderful I am. And hang on, there are two people in the waiting room. Oh no, there's not. Sorry, it did say. And David online has said it is, but your feed is not the only one I'm not getting notifications from, even though I asked for all. It seems like a glitch with YouTube. Hopefully, I'll get them all again now. So people moaning and groaning that are not being able to watch me online. There you go, my fan club. By the way, there is a fan club. Emma's got a fan club on Facebook, who's on the Tuesday group. And if anyone wants to join a WhatsApp group, Emma's setting up to discuss issues in the subjects in the classes to sort of little bits of homework are set, then I'll give you Emma's number, and if you're welcome to contact her and take part in that. Right, so let's find out if there's any questions. Henry can't have any more women in his life, but there you go. Henry, anything you want to say, love?
No, that was very good. Thank you.
Good.
At pace.
At pace. You paced yourself, right? And if you've been watching any of my videos about a certain guy who assaulted me on a ghost walk the other night, the police have spoken to him and given him a firm warning.
Oh, good.
Hmm.
Good.
I think the
Good.
CCTV's been published.
Oh yeah, that was so good. That was brilliant, and it was like I'm filming him as he's kicking me as I'm getting out my car, and I say, "You've just assaulted me," and he said, "Oh no, I haven't. Where's your proof?" And I said, "I've just filmed it, and you've just filmed me. You've just filmed you kicking me as well." Anyway, that's Lantwick Major people for you. So there you go.
I wouldn't go there.
Oh,
I wouldn't go there either. You don't go there. Right. Okay, then. That's another discussion I was having with somebody else. But yeah. Anyway, Henry, what would Pat like to say?
Right. Just apologies for being late again. You wanted to buy tonight, and so we were late. So I've had my meal now, so I'm okay. Yeah, I did hear something about some jewelry being found, Roman jewelry found. Did you hear anything?
Today?
Yeah. About some jewels, very unique or so, but it wouldn't explain. And then also underneath the Sphinx, not the Sphinx, the one of the pyramids.
Yeah.
And they found all this underground stuff, rooms. And I think there's someone buried there too, yeah. So that was the
in Egypt.
Yeah, under the Giza Plateau. Carry on, Pat.
Yeah, that's it. But because I don't know, I didn't find anything else. Like those 2 sentences, that was it. So I didn't look it up.
Yeah, but this is one thing that the writers like Herodotus were writing about. 400 years odd BC. Basically, that maybe underneath the Sphinx there are these rooms and sort of libraries, and there's a great library and stuff. So these are things that have been debated for many hundreds, if not thousands of years. But thank you for that. We may actually, before we go on to the break, we might actually type in Roman gold jewelry. If I can quickly find it, what I'm going to do is I'm going to look on my phone, or I could do it on the laptop here. Anyway, Anne, anything you want to say?
Go for a cup of coffee now. It was quite a lot of listening, that was. Thank you.
Good. Good. You did quieten down then, Anne.
Yeah.
Anything you've got to say, Goff?
Yeah, I suppose all this information about vercingetorix comes from the Romans.
And that is the problem. Yeah, that is the problem. And we sort of start discussing that before the end. So yeah, you are right. But there's some of it that when you go through it, it starts not to make sense. So yeah. So we will be looking at that. So Richard,
Very good.
thank you very much. And what we're going to do quickly, guys, before we have a break, I'm going to put you back on. I found this thing about the Roman jewelry quick. If you want to quickly look at this, what's this fresh in our minds? So Roman, here we go. I found it straight away, actually. Roman, hang on, and shut up. Roman gold. Oh, there we go. Roman gold jewelry found. And there it is. Some very odd items. Roman gold jewelry has been discovered in various locations. These finds include bracelets, necklaces, and coins. And it basically, I think it's a general thing that they're talking about. No, those are things online. So it could be any of those, but look this up online, from signet rings to sort of various stamps and stuff. I think this is a general thing. Look at that one there. I think this. Look at that there. So what they've got an intaglio ring,
Oh,
and they've what they've done this in a mold, with a gold setting, and then they've poured they've poured glass into that, and it looks like a hologram.
yeah. That's great.
So on that note, we are going to have a break now. So
Yeah.
it's going to be 15 minutes precisely. So it's 8:32. We will be back at 8:37, and all your trousers down and off, and we'll be back then. See you in a minute.
Oh God, I'm going.
Right, there we go. Right, let's do the sheeps. I love my shapes. Where are my shapes? My shapes, my shapes. Right, okay, my sheeps. La la la. La 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 la. La 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 la. La 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 la. La 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 la. La 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 la. La 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 la.
Recent gold jewelry Roman found in Great Britain.
Oh, I've seen something. This is the stamp alarm. It's on the, Don't worry about that. Well, there's nothing ahead of you there on the top. No. No? Okay. Yeah. No, I don't think, I know I haven't brought them in. Just start. I might have. Ah, it's dark.
Hmm?
It's not dark. It's not dark here.
Oh,
No, it's dark here, but I don't like the big light on.
I told you, Anne, sizes and everything.
I had a flat battery today.
oh no.
Yeah, I had a dental appointment, and I sort of organised it, and I was going to try and drive my car,
Mm-hmm.
and I left it a bit late
Oh.
in the car, and it wouldn't start.
Oh,
So I had to,
driven enough.
I've got one of these
I had to
expensive
go
jump
down
start
a
kits.
big steep hill from my hill fort
Mm.
all the way down
Mm.
to the dentist,
Oh.
and it was like awful.
Oh. Oh.
My knees were killing me, and
Oh dear.
they were killing me going downhill, but going uphill was fine.
Ah.
Yeah.
Anne, what are you on about?
Mm.
Walking.
Oh,
I had to walk to the dentist.
Oh gosh.
which was up and down a very steep hill and
Oh.
up and down and up and down.
Fair enough.
And Joe came with me. Sorry, I know it's totally irrelevant, but it put me in a bit of a bad mood. Not a bad mood. No, in
Right,
fact,
Anne, are we ready to start again?
I was quite proud of myself, really, that I was able to walk to the dentist
Yeah, good on
and
you.
back,
Mm.
up and down a very steep hill that I'm sure is a hill fort.
All right, okay. Are you there, Goff?
Yep,
You know, Goff has just got
blurry.
back. I've just had to run around the field because a sheep managed to get out, and they finished off my entire crop of broad beans.
Oh no. Oh,
I've lost the lot.
That's probably good for them.
Yeah, well, it's not good for the fact that I won't have any broad beans now, but that's life.
Oh,
And they also started to attack one of the Woodland Trust hedges, but I managed to get it in time. So
oh God.
anyway, there's my moan.
They're destructive little beasts.
They're destructive little bastards, yeah. Anyway, let's get back onto it. So we've got the now basically when we're talking about Julius Caesar, we're talking about the Roman world is not completely created yet, and you know there are big parts of Thracia and bits of Spain, even bits of sort of northern Italy that is not under the control of Rome yet. Big areas of Anatolia, they haven't sort of conquered the Nabateans yet. Egypt isn't under the throw of Rome yet, so we haven't got Cleopatra and Antony yet. So Mark Antony. So what you can see is this huge area of green. And what does it say about the huge area of green? The Celtic people or the Gallic people. Forget about Britain. So what we've got to expect is that Vercingetorix somewhere has to really unify the Gallic world against the Romans, but this isn't going to happen yet. This isn't going to happen until 52 BC. So up until 58 BC, Julius Caesar hasn't really become the great dictator yet. He's this great sort of governor of the area of Gallia, which is therefore shown, and that gives him the ability and power eventually, because he's in control of Gallia, to organize a campaign to conquer Britannia. Now, what we're talking about is that the world of the Gallic people on the left-hand side of that area, i.e. the area of modern central and northern France and Belgium, is an area that's seemingly wishing to deal with the Roman threat. Now, Catullus is the father of Vercingetorix, and the tribe that Vercingetorix would eventually become a leader of. Now, the Arverni tribe. Now, there's lots of tribes across the area of Gallia, otherwise known as Celtia, or known under the name of Catullus. Now, there were a number of revolts against the Romans, a number of times that the likes of Catullus, who's Vercingetorix's father, it was one of the leaders wishing to dispense with Rome. Now, in 52 BC, Vercingetorix's father dies. Now, Vercingetorix therefore becomes this great leader of the Averni tribe. And one of their big centers, or one of their big cities, is the area and location of the great victory against the Romans, right? And the great victory. Hang on, where's this map which I just showed you? Hang on, I just showed you earlier on. There was another map. Hang on, where is it? There was another map which, oh, there we go. This map, Celtica. There it is shown. Back to where I was. Now, the one thing about Jagovia and a great victory at Jagovia is that it's going to mark the beginning of the end of the years that Vercingetorix is to wish to form a Gallic empire, which doesn't last long at all. Now, on the map there, you've got the Battle of Jagovia, and everyone loves a good old battle. Now, if you guys have got the idea that Julius Caesar is this all-conquering person that defeats everyone, think again, because at Jagovia, which is also, as I said, a settlement associated with Vercingetorix, it tots up as follows. Gaius Julius Caesar apparently has under the command 6 legions. He wishes to defeat the Gallic tribes or the Celtica tribes once and for all. The army of Vercingetorix. Julius Caesar with 6 legions, auxiliary cavalry, Aela, auxiliary infantry, skirmishers, archers, slingers, the best of the Roman Empire. Having 6 Roman legions at your disposal is quite a big army that Julius Caesar put together. Some estimates is that the army of Julius Caesar is some 45,000 strong. You can take some of that with a pinch of salt. Even if it's 25,000 men strong, it's still quite big. The army of Vercingetorix is a whopping 30,000 strong. Now, if you want to think about some of these figures, if you want to think about comparisons with the Zulu and fighting Chelmsford in 1879, January 1879, and the Battle of Isandlwana, the figures are slightly different. It said that Cetsueo had under his command 40,000 warriors. Vercingetorix here at Jagovia had under his command, it said 30,000 plus Gauls, right? Mainly of his Averni tribe, supported by some other Gauls from elsewhere. The difference is that they're facing an army that's at equal strength. Cetsueo, on the other hand, had his 40,000 warriors that he sent out to his Isandlwana and Rorke's and other places. And the British army is probably in total strength about 4,000 strong. So when you're making comparisons here, 4,000 strong British army, 1879, Cetsueo's 40,000. Here at Jagovia, 52 BC, 30,000 Gauls, probably equal number of Romans. So this equally pegged. And guess what? The Gauls conclusively defeat Julius Caesar in battle. This for Julius Caesar could be the end of his career for good. A Roman general being defeated, his legions wiped out on the field of battle. This is a repeat of Spartacus. This is why we're doing Spartacus next week. This is a repeat of Spartacus. This is not as dramatic. The estimates of Roman legionaries and soldiers killed. Julius Caesar's figures, he basically says there's 46 centurions and 700 legionaries killed. But when you think about it, a whole Roman army unit is defeated in battle. So how is it the Roman figures of people killed on the battle are so low? And we don't know how many of Vercingetorix's army was killed either. But it's said that other Roman historians say that Julius Caesar was lying and it was in the thousands Roman soldiers killed and injured, right? So we're now getting more like it. Yeah. So the aftermath is simply that given his losses, Caesar ordered a retreat. So he's ordered a retreat. So if his losses are less than 1,000, why is he ordering a retreat if his army's somewhere like 30,000 strong? Very suspicious. Goff said something earlier on. You know, who's writing the history here? So even when Julius Caesar's defeated, he writes, "Oh, we had a few casualties, but then we still defeated, then retreated, then we still retreated." So that doesn't make sense, right? He withdraws the army from this region, the whole army, right, leaving Roman citizens open to death at the hands of Vercingetorix. So straight away we can see that there's something really, really fishy going on, right? There's something really, really fishy going on. So what we've got is we've got this location called Aviricum, right? Aviricum, there it is, Aviricum. Aviricum in 52 BC is a location of a native city town. And the Romans don't do themselves any justice with Aviricum at all. And I'll tell you what happens at Aviricum was this, yeah? So you got Jagovia, Aviricum next. Some say it's the other way around, but so Aviricum. So what happens is that Julius Caesar has disengaged, and then he decides to re-engage Vercingetorix. Now, what Vercingetorix is very aware of is that an army marches on its stomach. Now, we've heard that in films, an army marches on its stomach, right? And this is something I think coined by General Grant in the American Civil War. An army marches on its stomach, but I think other generals have used that terminology as well. I think Napoleon did it as well. And one thing, and the other thing as well is that at West Point Military Academy, before the American Civil War, this is really relevant. Before the American Civil War, at West Point Military Academy, where the likes of Grant and General Lee went to, only to be on opposing sides a couple of years later, right? At West Point Military Academy, they used to teach the campaigns of Julius Caesar in Europe and the areas of where Julius Caesar was fighting Vercingetorix, right? They would teach this in West Point. And General Grant would have commanded Sherman after Atlanta to march to the sea, all the way through to Georgia, all the way through to the coast, to cut the Confederacy in half, right? So after Atlanta, yeah, was set alight, it was a scorched earth policy, right? So as General Sherman is marching his Union army to the sea, he would destroy everything behind him. He would burn all the hay barns down. He would burn all the fields down, all the crops, everything, rip up the railroads, everything. So the Confederate army couldn't come behind him. So it would stop the Confederate army attacking General Sherman, right? And guess where this was based upon? The strategy of Vercingetorix, not Julius Caesar. Now, this is really, really important. So Vercingetorix knew that Aviricum, a city of his people, right, could not be held. But what he needed to do, he needed to wear down the Romans. So basically, Vercingetorix sacrificed his own people in a siege that cost the Romans dearly. The Romans besieged Aviricum for over 25 days. It wore out the Roman military. It used up most of their supplies. And Julius Caesar, in revenge for what Vercingetorix had deliberately done, he decided to slaughter 40,000 Gallic tribesmen at Aviricum. Vercingetorix's own people which Vercingetorix had sacrificed, and it nearly achieved the goal of wearing down the Roman military. It also meant that the local people would be so appalled by the deaths of 40,000 Gallic tribesmen that they would all rise up in rebellion, and they did. So Vercingetorix's strategy worked. It was a bit of a scorched earth policy. You wear down the Romans. You deny them their own supplies because they're wearing themselves out, right? Destroy, burn all the crops in the fields, burn all the settlements, burn all the farmsteads, destroy the ability for the Romans to have supplies. And then what Vercingetorix was going to do, he was going to lead Julius Caesar into a trap, a military orchestrated trap, right? There is our Vercingetorix, apparently, and this is Vercingetorix throws down his arms at the feet of Julius Caesar. Right. By the way, folks, I will be finishing by 9:30, but no later than that. But I'm trying to. I want to see what I can get through on this. So I'll just give you a breakdown of what happened at Elysee. Right now, Elysee itself, there it is. It was a native oppidum, was a fortification, but unfortunately, archaeologists have really struggled to find the location of this siege. Right. So this was in September 52 BC. So it was a fortification. It was a fortified locality. Vercingetorix had summoned his Gallic allies to attack the Romans when they besieged Vercingetorix. Now, what do I mean by that? Right, this is a trap. Well, what it is, Vercingetorix is hoping to trap the Romans. So by forcing the Romans to besiege him and his people, maybe 80,000 warriors or more, right? It's also estimated that there was 250,000 warriors there, but and people, family, children, all the rest of it. If we keep it more sensible to about 80,000, right? Is it a fairly large settlement? We don't know how big it is. You know, we're really struggling to work out precisely where it is, but we'll talk about that in a short while. I'm just giving you a bit of an overview still. And then what Vercingetorix wants to do is he's leading the Roman army to besiege him, and at the same time his allies are attacking the Romans from behind. So the Romans have got a two-front war, but the Romans are savvy, right? What they decide to do is they decide to build defenses facing outwards and inwards. So they've got an army who's defending the army behind that's attacking Vercingetorix at Elysee, right? And this is just giving you a bit of an overview. Eventually, what happens is this siege that lasts maybe 2 months ends in Vercingetorix being defeated, because Julius Caesar has just got the edge over Vercingetorix, right? They just managed to stop the Gallic tribesmen breaking through the Roman defenses, meaning that the Romans were being attacked from behind as well as fighting from the front, right? And what eventually happens is Vercingetorix, apparently to Plutarch, Vercingetorix surrendered in a dramatic fashion, riding his beautifully adorned horse out of Elysee and around Caesar's camp before dismounting in front of Caesar, stripping himself of his armor and sitting down at the opponent's feet, where he remained motionless until he was taken away. Caesar provides a first-hand contradiction of this account in the Deo Bellica Gallico, the story of the Belgic-Gallic War, describing Vercingetorix's surrender much more modestly. So he just, is a bit more like that, from the work of Lionel Royer in 1899. And there is wonderful Julius Caesar, right? So you can sort of understand why Richard Burton paid Julius Caesar, but that's another thing. So what we've got to do, and there's a victory horse of Vercingetorix. So what we need to do is discuss this battle, right? and Goff will come to the same conclusion as me at the end of this battle, right? But the Battle of Elysee, here's some key facts. A key engagement in the Gallic Wars is believed to have taken place near village Saint-Riant in the Burgundy region of France. Some believe that it was Elysee was actually north of Paris, but that's something else. It's debatable where it is. Mont-Oiseau, it's debatable. Historical consensus, while there were historical debates about the exact location, most historians now agree Elysee is Assert Saint-Riant. Evidence and geography, the geography of the site, including the presence of rivers on either side and the strategic location on a hilltop, aligns well with Caesar's description in his Gallic War. Archaeological excavations and discoveries at Saint-Riant have further supported this identification, including evidence of Roman siege fortifications, but very little evidence of fighting, which is really, really interesting. Now, the one thing I'm going to say is this: we will be doing the story of Tiberius's legions disappearing in the Teutoburg forest in AD 9, and Varus's legions. And one thing that we can understand from the archaeology at with Varus is that in an area which is quite narrow, 6-10 meters wide, they've managed to find loads of artifacts in the wooded, rooted area where the Roman legions were lost into Teutoburg forest. But they struggle to find where this was, right? That goes with Goff's point. How much of this actually happened? How much? There's a lot saying that it did happen. Somewhere the Gallic army completely disappeared and it was defeated. But what we need to do is let's think a little bit more about the Battle of Elysee. Let's just focus on this, right? So this was the climate of a military campaign. So September 52 BC, and also Mark Antony was at this battle, and Brutus was at the battle as well. Interesting names there. Commius, the great British leader, was the other side trying to attack the Romans. Yeah, and listen to this. Julius Caesar is said to have commanded 11 Roman legions. If you think about these Roman legions as full strength as being 5,500 men, take 1,000 away from each of those figures, make it 10 legions. That's 45,000 Roman legionaries plus auxiliaries, right? That's a lot. That's a fairly big army, right? So when you think about this, and sort of give you a comparison of how big that is. So if we're talking about 45,000 plus maybe 10,000 plus auxiliaries, maybe another 5,000, that's about 60,000. The army of Napoleon at Waterloo was 68,000, right? So this is not far off that. So big army. However, we've got no idea of the armies that were both sides of these defenses, involving the likes of Vercingetorix inside in there and Commius and the other leaders outside. The Romans say that 500,000 Gauls were involved in this, and I find that very difficult to believe. Julius Caesar writing the figures. Modern estimates say that there was just 80,000 warriors at Elysee, being besieged by maybe 60,000 Roman legionaries and auxiliaries and Aela and so on and their allies, right? And the people outside, there were armies of 50, 100, right? So it was basically 2-1 against the Romans. The differences that the Romans had, they had the defenses, right? Now, this is key. Now, this is a problem with the defenses, folks, right? Trying to find these defenses, trying to work out where this site is. And one thing I've always said is building defenses like this under attack is not easy. If you're being attacked all the time whilst you're building these defenses, well, it speaks for itself. This is a reconstruction, right? Basically, after Julius Caesar was defeated, he'd gone back to Rome. After the battle, that Julius Caesar had been defeated in the Battle of Gergovia, right? So obviously, Julius Caesar's told, right, you've got to do something. After your defeat, Julius Caesar, your defeat, you great leader, Julius Caesar, you were defeated, right? Vercingetorix is on the warpath and he threatens Rome. If Vercingetorix gets an army together and he threatens Rome, the Spartacus rebellion is going to be nothing. The Roman Empire is going to collapse, right? So this is what's happened. You got Avaricum. He rushes up to Avaricum, scorches policy. You got 40,000 people dead at Avaricum, and then Julius Caesar's army's a bit worn out, and he heads to Lycia. Basically, what Vercingetorix is doing, he's drawing Julius Caesar in, right, to the area where he's decided that Julius Caesar is going to be finally defeated. Now, with all this being said, with understanding this siege, it's said that the defenders, Vercingetorix defenders, are constantly attacking the Romans as they're building their defenses. But it's said that this took the best part of a month to build all this. Now, two things that were being said last night. Where did he get to build the defenses around Elysee, to build an outer set of defenses, right? It's estimated that 25 miles of fortifications were built. That's a lot of wood. That's a lot of woodlands. That's a lot of forest. And you start to think, well, what is going on? How is this possible? How much of this is exaggerated to be able to build this? And this apparently took 1 month. Now, it was hoped that the Romans wouldn't be able to complete these defenses, but they did actually complete these defenses, apparently. But even by Julius Caesar's own admission, the defenses were not completed. So Julius Caesar encircled this whole thing, apparently, and it had towers, it had ditches, and so on and so on, right? And apparently these people were being attacked by the Gauls. They made sorties to attack the works. Therefore, Caesar would add stakes in the bottom of these ditches. But when you're thinking about stakes and pits and so on one thing as well is what it does show, right, on one of the reconstruction drawings, right, where are the bloody drawings? Hang on a minute, we've got to go back. On one of the reconstruction drawings, you can actually see black things, these little black things on the inside. Right, so those are actually pits with stakes in them. And these are there to stop the defenders at Elysee attacking the Romans. Now, this is something that you may have all heard. Verica, after Avaricum, sacrificing his own people against the Romans to wear the Romans down, right? Vercingetorix had a meeting and decided, so that the warriors could save food, to send his own children, the wives of all the warriors, out of the gates towards the gateways of the Romans, right? With a messenger to say to Julius Caesar, can you look after our wives and children while you besiege us? And Julius Caesar says, no, we're not going to feed your wives and children. We're not going to kill them, but we're not going to feed them, right? So for a few weeks, Vercingetorix's own family and all his warriors' family were seen dying of starvation, lack of water, whilst the Romans were besieging Elysee. And Vercingetorix gave orders not to allow the women back into the fortress. He did this to his own people. So there were various sorties and there were various attacks on the outside defenses, and this went on week after week. But the Gauls could not break through. The Gallic people could not break these defenses. And what was happening was that there were other armies coming up from Rome to relieve Julius Caesar. And one of those armies was led by a certain individual called Brutus, who had a large number of cavalry with him. And this cavalry would run around the outside of the defenses, attacking the Gauls and killing them to the spot. So these multiple attacks could not break through the defenses. And that simply meant that the days of Vercingetorix were now over. Suddenly one day, Vercingetorix woke up in this probably 2-month siege. And he brought together his other chiefs, and he basically said, we've got to surrender. He convened the Gallic council and proposed that he should be killed or surrendered alive to appease the Romans. He believed, as Spartacus had believed, that if Spartacus gives himself up to the Romans, the people in the Spartacan rebellion would be spared. And you've seen the film. Spartacus goes forward and says, I'm Spartacus. And then everyone says Spartacus. And they're all put on crosses, right? How much of that is true or not, we don't know, because the Romans wrote the history, right? It's a good film, though, right? So what happened was that Vercingetorix decided to leave the defenses to surrender himself to Rome. And Caesar ordered the Gauls to surrender their weapons and deliver their chieftains. The chieftains were brought before him, and Vercingetorix was surrendered. Captives were given to Roman soldiers as part of the spoils of war, and there were people amongst those that had surrendered that the Romans would spare slavery. This rebellion was crushed. Julius Caesar would receive Vercingetorix. Caesar was now to become this great legend. He has finally defeated the Gallic tribesmen. He's finally defeated Gaul. And what then happened is that Gaul moves out of being an independent people into the echelons of the ancient Roman Empire. And all that area green, other than Great Britain, up until AD 43, was to be covered yellow. That would all be part of the Roman Empire. So for Caesar, Elysee was an enormous personal success, both military and politically. The Senate declared 20 days of thanksgiving for this victory. Due to political reasons, Caesar refused a triumphal parade because he wanted to continue campaigning. Vercingetorix was taken prisoner and held as a captive in Rome for the next 5 to 6 years, awaiting Caesar's triumph. And that triumph would lead in Vercingetorix being garroted in front of the tens of thousands of people that were at the forum. And the word of Vercingetorix death would be said and talked about, the million people that lived in Rome, and then the millions and millions of people across the Roman Empire. Julius Caesar was to become this great person in history. But by 44 BC, as we all know, Brutus would be involved in the assassination of Julius Caesar. The irony would be that Vercingetorix would be garroted 2 years before the death of Julius Caesar. And the great dictator, Julius Caesar, even though he would die, would not leave the history of the Roman Empire until the Roman Empire collapses in the year 476 AD. So that's all that tonight. We've done a nice little bit of a conclusion there. And let's see if there's any questions. Right, so Anne, should we start off with Anne? Anne can do some talking and then she can interrupt Goff. So Anne, anything you want to say? Anne.
Thank you. Thank you, because I do get confused. I thought that was Caractacus, but I could see now that it wasn't. So no, because that.
No, I did say vercingetorix throughout the entire presentation.
Yeah,
but that's
I know. But I didn't realize it was all the battles were, you know, in Europe. Well, in Gaul, really. Yeah.
Yeah, you'll find out that Spartacus next week, it all takes place in Italy, so that's fine.
All right. I didn't actually watch the film because I saw it a long time ago, and
I thought you said you watched it.
no, I didn't want to spoil what I knew, but I can't remember it anyway. No, sorry. Yes, very good.
Kurt Douglas dies at the end.
Oh.
Anyway,
no, it gives
Yeah.
gives you a flavour of that, damnable period, Thank you.
Continually damnable.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's right. It was pretty.
Okay then.
Are we going to do any more Romans? Oh,
no, we're not going to do the Romans at all. That's it. We're finished with the Romans. We're just going to leapfrog the Romans.
Yeah. No, I think it was a very good transition from Iron Age to end of the Roman era.
Yeah, well, it's got to be done eventually.
Okay.
Right, Pat.
No, just enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
Good.
I'll try to be on time next week.
Good. You should be. So you should be. Anything from you, Goff?
Yeah, are there any sort of documentation or proof from the Gallic side what happened, or is it all Roman?
It's all written from the Roman perspective, and you just start to think that how can you not be sure where Elysee and the siege actually took place? How can you not really be sure if it's such a big thing in history? And Julius Caesar's writing this history, and what you've got to look at the facts is Vercingetorix did end up in Rome. How did he get there? Right, Vercingetorix. Julius Caesar even wrote about being defeated by Vercingetorix. Right, you've got Aviricum. So why would Julius Caesar lie about that? But Julius Caesar has this great victory over Vercingetorix. But how much of that victory was what I've just said is another story altogether. And Julius Caesar could have easily said, look, I went with one legion and I defeated Vercingetorix, or he could say what he liked, but he chose that he had 10 to 11 legions altogether, which is a considerable Roman army that would be very rarely come together.
Yeah, it must have been the entire sort of Roman force at that time.
Well, to be honest with you, when I say, yeah, you've actually picked me up on something there. When the Roman Empire is at its height, it's got 25 Roman legions. But the Roman Empire is at its height in about probably the period of Hadrian and Antonius Pius. So we're talking about the 120s to the 140s, when there's about 25 Roman legions, which the Roman Empire could support. But this is 200 years earlier, and the Roman Empire 200 years earlier is just under half the size that it would be, right? So you picking up the fact that 11 legions is pretty much a big chunk of the Roman army. It's probably more like 2/3 of the entire Roman army in the entire empire in one spot. Yeah. Led by Julius Caesar. And that's dangerous, Goff, because that means that there's something in the whole story. That means that Julius Caesar could easily have marched on Rome and become this great dictator because he had the army. Rome didn't allow that to happen anyway, so you might think that maybe Julius Caesar exaggerated how much the army actually had at his disposal. And certainly the other thing as well is Julius Caesar is able to put this army together quite rapidly, when in fact part of the army would have been in Spain, a bit in North Africa, a bit in the Levant, a bit in Turkey, a bit in Greece. How is he able to put that whole army together so quick? So, and some was on a Germanic frontier, which was quite some miles away. So yeah, you can see where there's something not quite right about the whole story.
Your cat keeps trying to get your attention.
Yeah, Marley Mo. Yeah, my cat. It's my cat. Right, okay then. So Goff. Not Goff. We done you, Goff. Thank you very much. And Anne didn't interrupt you today, Goff, which is a bit odd. Okay, Richard, anything you want to say?
No, very interesting. Well, I'm going to make a move. Okay.
All right then. All right then. Make a move before we say it. See you next week, Richard. Right, Henry, anything you want to say, love?
The more I listen, the more it sounds like someone had a very good PR writer.
Yeah.
And events maybe didn't pan out as probably described. Were just glorified.
Yeah. Actually, when you think about Elysee, right? You've got to look at this logically, right? This all happens within a space of about a few months, right? And how is it, right, that Vercingetorix managed to get a message over to the Britons to get an army of 30,000 people together, send them over the Bristol Channel, march them all the way to where Vercingetorix wants this British army, right? Then there's lots of things that don't make sense, right? And if Commius was there, how and why and how many warriors would he have had there? And the other thing as well is there's 2 points with this. 2 points. The one point is this: if Commius has got 20,000 men and maybe women with him, right? How is he going to feed them? Where has the food come from? Can you imagine there's 20,000 warriors wandering down your street and you've got to feed them? Where's the food going to come from?
Little, where do you think?
Oh yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah, so that the next thing we move on to, well, you caught me out there. You are right. So the next thing we move on to, right, is that the last question I was asked last night is that this is key, right? Okay, you've just said that, Carl. How do we know that there was British warriors in Britain helping the Gauls, right? Not just because Julius Caesar told us. We know because iron from Britain is found in iron swords in central France. And those iron swords have come from Britain. So that's the archaeological evidence. And as somebody said last night, they said, Carl, what about those iron trading bars that the Iron Age people had in Britain? Have any of them been found in France? And that was one question that we're going to leave open for next week.
Okay.
That's it.
Well, they could have just been an exporter of weapons. That wouldn't have had to be an exporter of soldiers.
Yeah, you just seen something there. Yeah,
maybe they were all. Maybe everyone in Gaul was on the side of.
Maybe they exchanged it for the wine.
Yeah,
exactly. Wine and women, mind you. I wouldn't want a French woman. Anne, go on, say something quick.
No, I just thought maybe there were lots of people in France who were on the side of Vercingetorix. They wanted to defeat the Romans too.
Yeah, but there was all in the army, like in the army of General Custer, like in the army of Chelmsford in 1879, there were local people who hated Ketzweiler. There were local people that hated the American warriors that were fighting General Custer. They also hated people who hated Vercingetorix in 52 BC. That happens throughout history. So it's your own people that fight against you.
All right. Okay.
On that note, anyone want to say anything else?
good night.
Okay, we'll call it a day now. And apparently, next time Goff goes to Madeira, he's gonna bring back a much bigger Madeira cake, so it takes me longer to eat, which isn't gonna work because it would take me, yeah, it goes right. Anyway, thanks for joining us this week.
I won't be here next week.
Okay then. Anyway, have a chat with me in a minute, Anne. No, Goff.
Bye-bye.
No, Anne.
Bye.
No, Pat.
Have a
No,
good week.
Henry. See you next week. No. And
Bye-bye.
Anne's not going to be with us next week. Okay then, fair enough.
Have a good week.
Be here.
We will
Bye.
miss you, Anne. Night, guys. Night.
Yeah,
What?
no, it was just it was yeah. I mean,
What?
I gave that was a gift, right? Just leave
Okay,
that
fair enough. Fair
as
enough.
a gift.
Okay.
And then
Okay, fair
I
enough.
should pay you £50. I'm hoping it's £50, not more than that, is it?
That's the 2 monthly thingamajig. Yeah, no, that's fine. Okay.
Yeah, that's
All
all
right.
right.
It's up to you.
I
It's up
forgot,
to you.
you know, and I haven't sent it yet. But
It's up to you, Anne. Okay.
but oh yeah, what about you know, the elusive
What?
watchtower?
Oh, the watchtower. It's there. It's in the car park, and maybe we should all have a little trip over. Then we get the plaque on the wall because the plaque's still in the studio to go there.
All right.
Okay, so we need to do that. Yes.
Yeah, when
Yeah.
you get some time,
Yeah.
well, after I come back, I'm going to Norfolk.
Okay then.
I'm going to Norwich. Yeah.
Okay. Well, we could all organize a little soiree. I don't know. We'll put the plaque up and maybe we'll
See when
take
you've
some
got
fast.
time. Yeah, when you come over and you've got time and
Yeah, well,
do it.
we
All
got
right,
we got
before
the
the week,
flask
yeah.
dispenser, and if everyone brings a cup, and we'll have some cups of tea, and we can have some cakes, and we can sit down and have a chat. That sounds good to me.
Yeah, that'd be fun. That'd be good. So
An hour in Cowbridge. Yeah, that's good. It sounds good to me.
yeah.
That'll go because you want to do some shopping.
Yeah, she will. No, she'll come, but
Okay, good.
yeah.
Good. Bring Dell as well. All right then. Okay, I'll.
I'd love to get over Dal, but well,
he does different things, doesn't he? So. All right then, Anne. I'm going to dash, so I'll look for. So I won't see you next week. I'll see you in a couple of weeks then. All right.
Yeah. Okay then.
Anyway, thanks for everything, Anne. Take care.
Yeah. Bye.
Night, folks. Night. Anyway, thanks for joining us on YouTube. Dodgy Gits there. Emma's there. And whoever else is there, Lisa might be there. So we're going to call it a night now. I've got to go outside. I've got to travel back to South Wales now. Little bloody fucking sheep eating things. And got to do some more chicken stuff as well. Right, feed the cats to go because I gotta go home and gotta come back. So okay, many thanks for that. Just gonna have a look at the chat box. Oh, chat box. Is there any messages in the chat? Oh, hang on. What's this new? Start a new group chat with 2 or more participants. Huh. How does that work? New group chat. I didn't know that was there. New chat. Main chat. New chat, main chat. I don't know if that's a good idea. Yeah, Emma, I'll do that message thing, but I've got to do more sheep on it. Email. No cat. No cat. I feed you cat. No cat. No. Be my cat. Fucking daft. Get down there a minute. I'll go do this. Anything in the chat box 1, anything in the chat box 2. Hang on. Anything in the chat box 3. That one there. New chat, main chat, no. Other chat. So if people are putting stuff in the chat, I don't know where it's going to be now. So 1 there, 2 there, 3 there, 4 window there, 5 window there, 6 window there, 7 window there, nothing in the chat. No, diolch yn fawr i chi. Gwelwch chi eto nos da. No.